You're lucky.
Recording has now started.
This was.
I promise to do my part.
Well, I think I said this last time, but welcome to the last task force meeting.
The actual last.
The actual-
Last final version
Right.
7,
Right.
extra final.
And Holly and Mary are missing, but they said they would be missing, so I think this is all of us. And kind of the same agenda as last time, just giving you guys time to do your work, basically, and bring it all home. So I think that I need to pass this to you.
Yes.
Jim? I hope not spilling my water. Hopefully it is. It gonna go?
Okay.
Where is it? Is this?
Do I need to switch sides?
Can we get, is this it? No, it's not.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, it's short. It's 40. So if you want to, where do you go?
Just plugging in. Okay, you want me to switch sides? Please.
That's so funny.
That's.
So did you guys, see what I wrote for the retreat this weekend?
Yeah.
It's okay. Timing wasn't the greatest. I really wanted you guys to wrap up your work before I had to write that memo. But I had to get something in the retreat packet for the council to be able to read in advance. So I apologize for.
Way to point out that we're running late.
Is that what it said?
No.
Well, actually, per the charter, our report isn't due to him until the 29th.
I know.
Yeah.
No, I think that was it April or was it March? I think initially I thought it was gonna end in March.
Oh.
So I think you're a month late.
Oh, okay.
A month
His
better.
pointing it out was enough. You didn't have to layer it on.
No, because I think I noticed that in something I was doing, I'd be like, oh, we initially were gonna finish this in March.
Compared to the last one, we're months ahead of schedule.
Absolutely. Well, we could have finished
Preferred
in March,
version.
it just wouldn't have gotten a very good plan.
We have made it this time for sure.
Okay.
Jeff, can I pass you your cookie and cake pop?
Oh, yes, please.
It's gonna be mine. You need your bag?
I don't need it. I'll just grab it later. Okay. Oh, thank you. It turns off automatically at some point, which is, just means I have a really bad habit of never.
Hybrid vehicles that say that with the engine running.
I'm not turn it off, so it's.
That's fine. It'll turn off in a second. Okay, so I'm downloading a local copy, so this is no longer live. So if you're adding your last minute votes, it will not be, it will not be included. It's saved. That's not it. Sorry, give me just a second. Did you all have a chance to look at and review?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts?
Had some thoughts.
Did you see the email I sent you about the
But the memo,
fiscal impact and the?
yeah,
It's, oh,
should be fine.
I think empowers line.
Thanks.
Note the smiley emoji. I'm told that that's a bad thing. You just call them. They think that's a sign of anger or something.
What's that? Not that smiley.
The thumbs up, have you heard about that?
Yeah.
You don't like that?
You can't end sentences with periods either, which blows my mind.
They don't do 3 dots either. Yeah,
what?
yeah.
Yeah.
Don't worry. It's not real.
So while Jeff's doing his thing again, this isn't intended to stifle discussion, but we are running low on time, so I took a jump. And I sort of re-paraphrased based on our discussion last week. Which 2 lines we were trying to stop from crossing. And that's expenses and revenue, as I understand it. Thank you. So I did my little model here on what's slide 8 and 9 for enhancements and reductions. And basically, that keeps revenue above expenses through 2030. Or finally become nowhere close to the reserve. And it doesn't do anything with parks because I want Lake Point. That is my bias.
Okay. I've got the file, it is ready to go.
Like, yeah, I noticed in that,
So as I stated in my email, thank you for this, by the way. As I stated in my email,
Thank you.
what I've done is these top 2 graphs are the model as they were given to us before any of our recommendations. And so we have, this is the reserve and the target and the reserve goal. So you can see as those lines go down, that is the result of that annual deficit where the expenses are greater than the revenues. And so to demonstrate that clearly, I made this graph. So the blue line is the revenue, and you can see the slope is less steep than the expenses. The expenses is going up like this, the revenue is going up like this. And so, and then over here, I have, this is just referencing the other sheet. It just grabs each of these items that we've previously discussed, the average score across all of our votes here. And then this basically just toggles whether a given item is included. You can see this first line because it has a score of 2.78. I set the score threshold to 2.5. So because this is higher than 2.5, that means that this gets turned on and therefore gets contemplated as part of the budget. I also, based on what Rob said last week, I did include an increase assumption. Certain costs certain revenues or costs may increase. The levies, because it is a cents per $1,000. I wanted to confirm this with you, Rob and Melinda. Since it is a cents per $1,000, if we increase the appraised value by development, then that would get assessed on the increased value. So, and to give you the property tax assumption, broadly speaking, is a 1.9% increase. So we could, we are justified in changing this to 1.9, consistent with other property taxes. I said it to 1.5 to be conservative, but
That 0.9 is new construction.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and when that toggles on, is it based in the year that's in that column?
that's right. So you can see here's 2006. That means that's when the first time that it shows up. And then the increases happen on the subsequent year. So you get 560,000 in the first year. And then the next year you get that 1.5 increase bump. And so other items like rental, picnic shelter rental fees, I didn't include an annual increase. I expect that those are probably going to be pretty flat. The CAPE program, I just kept those flat again, just kind of making some broad conservative assumptions across the board. And cost savings, obviously, you don't get, if you save today, that doesn't mean that savings gets bigger later, so those.
saving.
That's a shame.
So yeah, so there's some different scenarios. I kind of had everything starting in 2026, not because that's what I think, but mostly just because that's where I wanted to start, and then we can kind of talk about where we want to put each of them as we go. But I think one of the other things that we should probably talk about first is what?
So close.
Yeah, so close. So like, I set this to 2.5, which is kind of averaged up to, the rounded up to 3. But if we do 2.4 and catch just a little bit more, then that gets us within spitting distance of the structural deficit. And so what this means is, and you can see that we have a bigger surplus in these years. So in 2026, 27, and 28, that means that we are adding, you can see how the reserve is increasing in those years. And so if we didn't want to add a surplus in those years, then we can choose, like, for example, we can choose to have this be effective in 2028. Oh, I added a protection, so let's
It's
unprotect.
so protected, even you can't touch it.
There's gonna be a stickler for vocabulary. The blue bars aren't reserve, the blue bars are ending fund balance. That's not the same as reserve. That's the ending fund balance. The reserve target is 20% of expenses.
Yeah, so the actual reserve in this case is forecast to be higher than the target reserve. So the fund balance is synonymous with reserve. It's just that,
I disagree with that. I don't think that's true. I think
okay,
fund balance and reserve are different things.
okay. I think in normal nomenclature, they are,
It can be, but for this purpose, it is the same.
Okay,
yeah, so what I did, as I said, I just changed those two large levy lifts to 2028. So that means that we aren't seeing a surplus in 26 and 27. We see that surplus in 2028, but then it disappears by the time you get to 2030. So now we get to have fun with numbers, and basically just, play around with this. We can look at these scores and kind of evaluate, these which ones came in close, which ones did not, and therefore we can debate on whether we think this one only scored a 2.3, but maybe we can convince each other that actually we do want to include this one.
First of all, love it. Thank you so much. This is super cool.
Yeah.
Before we go into the voting, and in order to know what we need to jiggle, I feel, but let me know if you agree, that if we align on when they would come into play, realistically, the earliest they could come into play. So maybe something is not doable before 2028, or something is at least not possible in 2025. If we align on those first, then we can see what we need to tweak, because those are two things we can tweak. And I feel as though column I seems more constrained than column F.
Right.
Which is not a cop out, but more hey, Melinda and Rob, if we agree on can you give us guidance on column I so that we might be better informed for column F? So that's just my thought.
Yeah, so my understanding is that we can go to the voters as early as this November, and therefore would go into effect in 2025. So
Yeah, and technically you can go to voters as early as August. I don't recommend.
I don't think we would recommend that either.
But I just wanted you guys to know that you can do that.
So all the levy lid lifts we can make the assumption that it can be as early as 2025.
But my question would then be to both of you, should it be 2025, both in terms of convenience, in terms of electoral scheduling? Is 2025 realistic? Because we can always push it back out later, but I'm thinking if we know the earliest we can, then we can see what the situation is and we know that's the earliest we can go for all those things. If you're saying 2025 is good, then I suggest we start with 2025 and take it there.
And I think you know that with the MPD, there is a 1 year delay compared to a levy lift. You guys know that, okay?
Yeah.
Because you gotta have a year to set up the MPD first. Okay.
Yeah, so if we were to just set these all up as the earliest that they could possibly, 2025 for the levy lid lift, the MPDs 2026. I put these in, and Rob, I wasn't sure if I got these right. It looked like the total funding for the recommendations was 1.86 per year, and the cost associated with it would be 2.2. And the difference was, it was proposed that would be made up by the general fund.
Yeah, and that cost portion, you guys don't really need to worry about. Because it's just gonna be in a totally separate fund that's not gonna touch the general fund, with the exception of some one-time help early on to help us with the site due diligence, feasibility and stuff like that.
Okay, so I guess if we wanted to be thorough and say, hey, we read the memo by Rob
Yeah,
that says that these are,
Yeah.
and we wanted to present, okay, here's what our recommendations are, and then this is also what it looks like if you go forward with
Yeah.
these funding options. What costs should we include as hitting the general fund for Lake Point?
could be as high as 1.5 million if we don't get that county grant that the committee met on just today. We won't know for a few more weeks, but if we do get the grant, it'd be just $500,000 hit to the general fund.
Okay, and that will be in which years?
25
and 26?
Yes.
Okay. So if we make the assumption,
I'm just gonna be optimistic and say we got the grant.
I think we will too.
It's,
Okay, so I'm gonna say if this is equal to 1, then negative 500,000. 0. Okay, and then the funding I will remove because the rest of the funding and costs will be in its own thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll call this Lake Point preliminary grant.
I think council and I would like to know what you guys think about a NPD for Lake Point. So even though it doesn't touch the general fund, I think it would be helpful for you guys to tell the council what you think.
When you say an NPD just for Lake Point, I mean, the conversation we had last week was about an NPD just generally. We wouldn't need a separate NPD for Lake Point, would we?
That's right. And if you look at the memo under funding option 2, it shows setting up the NPD now with the 5 cents you guys have been talking about. But being clear with the public that would be the first rate, and then a year or 2 later, the second Lake Point would go into effect, either by additional voter approval or council manic authority. So in funding strategy 2, it's a 2-step rate. It's one going into effect, the lower one going into effect, and then the higher one going into Lake Point a little bit later.
Yes.
Sorry, I guess are we taking into account if some of these don't pass the vote? I know the public safety one most likely, but are we able to project if some of them don't pass?
Yeah,
The
so,
voters.
so we can just kind of force the toggle off
Oh, okay,
and see what that looks like. Which there's a million things that we can do, right? There's a million
Yeah.
ways that we can cut. And so what I think that we should do is try to settle on kind of like one scenario and say like this, best case, and this is what we want it to happen. And then just say that these items that are higher risk, like the ones that need voter approval, here is a scenario. This is a worst case scenario if they don't pass. We want them to pass. We recommend them to pass, to go forward with this. But just so you know, if you sign up for this, this is the risk that you're signing up for as well.
Well, really, we should move the score threshold up and see if we can make it with just the top ones we wanted, right? That was like the best case scenario.
Well, based on what I saw, we're almost there with the highest level elements.
Yeah, so I have it at 2.4. If we bump it down one more notch to 2.3. The Lake Point's gonna add a little bit, but yeah, so we're fully in the green in 2030 if we take everything 2.3. So again, we can move some of this green, so we're not adding to the reserves by shifting the timing out. But this number, the key number here that we don't want the lines to cross before 2031, that would get us there.
But then if we are collecting some surplus before that, can we assume that that surplus will then be available to not make it cross that?
Yeah, so even though the lines will still likely cross, the revenue and expense lines will likely cross in 2030, by adding this surplus to the reserve or the balance, as it may be called, that means that we're well above the reserve goal. And so this would, in the past, when the city has had this much in the reserve, in the fund balance, they have moved it to the Strategic Opportunities Fund rather than just having a bunch of cash in the bank. They move it to the Strategic Opportunities Fund to purchase land to capitalize on economic development opportunities.
And
Grants, parks.
Yeah.
Grant matches.
Yeah.
I noticed when you moved, just for the example, the public levy lid lift to 2028 until 2026, it felt as though the overall amount we weren't just pushing the green further out, we were also diminishing kind of the amount of green that was there.
And that's because of that increase. If you start it in 2026, then you have 5 years of 1.5 or 1.9 increases, which translates to a good chunk of change. I mean, you can see how much it is by, if we start it in 2025, we get 560 the first year, but then we get an additional 40,000 per line. So we get another $80,000 by 2030 by starting it in 2025. Whereas if you start it in 2030, then it's just the 560.
So in that case, I think that green, because I don't want it sitting for nothing, is there a possibility for us to recommend, if we agree, but and also to model the ability to allocate a chunk of that green on the graph into a dedicated investment fund? So that it's not just locked in a capital investment fund. Maybe the capital investment fund is invested somehow. Okay,
I think all of the cash is in an investment account.
oh,
And so there would,
then we're good.
and so if I don't think that we should recommend this necessarily. Again, I don't think that the government should serve as a bank and an investment fund. This is not our retirement fund here. But to the extent that we did make a recommendation that there is, 10 million of extra dollars in the fund, we can also go and make an adjustment to the revenue associated with, I don't know what line it's on, investment earnings. So we can make an assumption to say, if our reserve is twice as big, we will get twice as much investment earnings from that. I haven't modeled that in here yet, but that is something to
Yeah,
consider.
because I too agree that having a big blue bar for no good reason isn't great. But if we can use that big blue bar as an investment for pushing out the moment where the lines cross again, I'm personally for that.
To play devil's advocate, if the blue bar stays in my bank account, I can invest it in higher rate of returns than Melinda can if it goes into the blue bars.
Yeah.
She's limited in her investment choices, I am not.
That's
Yeah.
true.
And I
Which
would
is
say-
why we don't
Yeah.
recommend the, yeah.
I
No,
would say
they,
the bigger that blue bar is, the less chance we're gonna get voter approval on something.
that's right. That's right.
Hey, can you turn off everything except for photo enforcement?
Yes.
I just like to see what photo enforcement does.
I'm gonna turn off Lake Point. Safety. Okay, so and then have to go back and add all these. So we have 3 cameras, so I'll add the 4th camera. And then this one was the one that basically had 0 impact, so we won't do that one. And then Tobin also recommended against this one, so I'll just do the ones that were kind of recommended by Tobin, and then. Do
The
you want,
last, well, I emailed the last level for the ticket increase was 150. I don't know if where we're at, we finalized whether 130 is on row
yeah,
23.
right now it's at 136 was,
I know you, Mike, I think you were advocating for 150.
He mentioned he was willing to go to 150.
do we want to,
I think it'd be good to stick with Lake Forest Park level and.
And Kirkland's at 136 too.
right, okay, so raise of hands, how many advocate for increasing it to 150? Okay, so we'll leave it at 136. Okay. Okay, so, and then Rob, do you want me to turn off all of the savings as well, or?
Keep those,
Okay,
just on the revenue side. Okay, what's the problem? Photo enforcement alone buys you time.
yeah. And how quickly, that's to Edward's, point. I have these, I think I had them phased in, so first 2 by 2027, the third one by 2028. Do you think all of these could be implemented quickly, or
I think 2026 is realistic.
for all 4?
Maybe half 26.
What's the 4th one? We have 3 school zones. What's the 4th one?
I think there was discussion about another red light camera at Simons and 61st and
68 and 170, right?
Yes, speed, non-school speed cameras are now allowed, and, I think we can leave that up to Tobin, but I think a top contender is on Simons near Rhododendron Park, sorry.
Mhm.
I just need the right turn. I'll go slow.
Yeah.
And again, you don't have to decide location. One other thing is, so the 3 schools would be the high school, the middle school, and Orleans. Orleans is not gonna be a big revenue generator because it's so residential over there. So I'd say we just leave it up to Tobin to recommend where they are based on traffic needs and safety. And then also, the new law says you need to do a DEI analysis of where to put these, so it doesn't have a disparate impact on lower income neighborhoods. And so that's also gonna be a factor on where they go.
And then Tobin mentions the new no left turn at 60th and 170th also.
It's flashing. I saw the light flash the other day.
okay, so if I make the assumption that we go forward with all 4 Cape cameras, 2 in 26 and 2 in 2027, then that puts us, that gives us until 2028 before the lines cross. And it gives us, because we're starting them early, it gives us a healthy, because we increase the reserve for a couple of years and then dips into the negative territory. So,
And I agree with leaving it to the traffic experts, but I would advocate that there's no reason we should have safety controls in 2 school zones and not the other 3.
Mm.
That's an inconsistent application of this tool, in my opinion. And I think it's an easy message to say, we are going to have photo enforcement in school zones.
Mhm.
It's understandable and consistent.
We might need to wait on Englemore because they're in the process of redoing that intersection.
Oh, I hadn't heard they were redoing it.
Well, when they redo the whole Englemore,
Yeah,
one of the things they were working on was the traffic flow. And we know that that intersection's always been a death trap. So that was
Right.
part of what they were gonna do is try to reconfigure how people come in and out of there.
that might be a 2028 then.
okay.
So what Ben was saying, the reason we did select 2 school zones and not others was for data purposes, for speeding.
Mhm.
And like if Tobin goes out to Morelands and finds out that everybody's doing 20, he's probably not going to recommend a camera there.
Right.
They're not all doing 20.
Yeah, Juanita, yeah, it's really bad though.
Yeah.
I'm just ringing the public safety bell, my friend.
Mhm. Now, I mean, does it matter that, like, half that entrance into Kenmore Middle School is actually Snohomish County?
Yeah, it's gonna be on the Kenmore side.
Right, yeah, that's why. So that may kind of, make things kind of weird up there is that how it works, how it fits up there.
So just while we're on this, that 4th camera. The 4th camera, I mean, there were, the first 3 were all schools, and so I think that many of us were like, yeah, that makes sense. So for the 4th camera, I'm a big fan of the traffic enforcement. I think that it's equitable. You don't have to have cops. Traffic stops are dangerous for cops anyway. They're dangerous for everybody. Like, I'm just generally a big fan of photo enforcement. And so is there anybody who had hesitations about the 4th camera that is pulling down that score more than the other ones that?
I mean, I put 2 because it was not I'm not for it. It was simply let's address the first 2 and then let's reprioritize. As we are talking about it to bump the priority up, I'm very happy to move it to 3. It had nothing to do with, I don't want the 3rd or 4th. It had everything to do with let's tackle it in wave 2. So,
Okay. So yeah, we can phase it.
Yeah. so I'm
Yeah.
happy to add it to put it to 3.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm
we can
changing your
move on
vote to 3.
'cause that's basically what I was thinking. It's like, we don't want to dump or can't, because then people are like, you're just picking places to.
And I don't even die on this hill, but I mean, again, there is a big difference between saying we put cameras at schools and we're using cameras throughout the city. I
Right,
feel like cameras throughout the city were, what I heard at the town hall, what you hear from people is, we don't wanna have cameras everywhere. I think it's a different sell to say we use cameras throughout the city for traffic versus we use them in front of schools. But I've said my piece, I'm cool, you can make my 0, whatever.
I mean, it's high enough as it is.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's valuable feedback for the council,
Yeah.
context, everything. So,
I have a two, because there is a state legislative push and another board that I'm on, that low traffic violations tend to be inequitable. So it's good for me to hear that there will be DI study that will have to be put in force to make sure that it's at a location that's not disparaging the community there.
yeah, and we can, I think in the memo, what I was planning to make sure was on there, that as part of the DEI study, if this is a good chunk of change for purposes of solving budget problems, which, a good chunk of our budget problems is from police and safety. So I think it's warranted. But that said, I think that utilizing the ability to lower the fines for low income individuals and some of the options that are available to us. I think that as part of the DEI study, we should consider the financial impact and,
Is that currently a thing? Where
Yeah.
people can actually get reduced?
I don't think that we do it now. I think it's, the law is requiring it to some extent.
Yeah, starting soon, yeah, so low income folks will get their ticket waived, the first 1 or 2 tickets waived with this new legislation.
And is it generally required to have like signage, like, look, you're hitting a camera zone?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
There's something.
so there's signs, so people kind of know ahead of time.
And flashing as well. I know the one, so my
Yeah.
kid goes to Kenmore Elementary and each time each time you're hitting the slow because school,
Yeah.
it's flashing. I mean, if you don't see it, you're really not paying attention.
Yeah, and it tells you photo enforce. slow down.
They
Oh,
photo
yeah.
enforced all the time, and by the way, you're gonna have to go really slow now because it's a school pickup time.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're not allowed to give you a ticket unless it does say photo enforced.
okay,
Yeah, and if the lights aren't flashing, if there's a malfunction, you won't get charged for that either.
okay.
I've proven that. And then when they mistakenly turn the camera on.
Yeah.
You don't get a ticket.
Yeah.
I'm not going slow if it's not flashing.
Yeah, after my first ticket, I learned how to drive slow, so.
The vehicle tab fees remind me, is that one councilmanic? It's just a timing, right?
It is, yeah, and so it went into effect in 2023, so it wouldn't be until 2025 that they'd be able to put the extra $10 in place.
Okay, so if we were, if say, for example, a scenario where the council, where we go to the voters and we ask for a levy lift for public safety and public safety sales tax, et cetera, and none of those pass, the options that the council has available to them councilmanically include the CAPE program, the vehicle tab fees, the utility tax. And I think that is,
Oh, so that's like our backup plan, you're thinking?
I think that's it.
Water, are you doing?
Oh, surface water, is that one? Another?
Surface water utility tax and.
This one's voter. So what that looks like is gets us really, really close. So councilmanically, the council can get very, very close just with those things. So if worst case scenario, if we can't get things passed by voter approval, we still have options. But many of those items were also the lowest voted by us.
Jeff, is row 13 eliminated emissions tax, is that toggled off? We need to toggle that on, or does that mean where the model currently doesn't include eliminating it?
That's right. So, yeah, so Melinda's model includes the revenue.
Yeah.
And so if this is off, then that means that we are
Counting on that.
counting on that revenue.
I think it might, at least, I don't know, maybe my brain works differently, but it might be easier to look at these in order of the score, so we can see which are the ones like we would. Cause I know you can do anything on the spreadsheet, but, okay. I mean, cause those would be like the top ones we would be fiddling with, right, to start with.
Yeah.
At least on the cost savings or the revenue side of things.
Breaks.
No.
Okay, so if I'm gonna get rid of this row. Oh. Huh?
Yeah, sure.
That was odd. Okay, so we'll sort these largest to smallest.
I think what we were suggesting is to sort by revenue. So.
By
on
revenue
page-
impact or by score?
No, by score.
Oh, okay.
I mean, so the things that the most of us agree on, then those would be, we would fiddle with the most, right?
Okay, so there's, so if we go back to our threshold, so undoing Rob's scenario. So the CAPE, the the streetlights efficiencies, that's no brainer. So I feel like I should just color code these for councilmanic versus not. We'll do blue for councilmanic and, or for,
Photo.
and voter approved will be orange. Nope, not that one.
What's the levy for 32?
Oh, did I miss another one? There it is.
While he's doing that, I had a question, Lauren, about the balancing act. So we only had like 103 responses, so it's, nothing's gonna be statistically, viable, but how many of those people were putting in there that, we should do the reduction in the climate action plan program? That chart we had just had like a dollar value. I just wondered.
Yeah, let me pull it up.
Okay.
Is it a lot, remind me, is the lodging tax?
Problematic.
Okay.
And by the way, I am gonna be recommending lodging tax no matter what, because it's a strategic economic development thing. It's not an increase in the tax, that you've probably heard me say. It's just taking the counties and spending it here locally, transferring.
It's like free.
And that's just, we should have done it years ago. It's just a way of better promoting Kenmore and getting us on the map and improving our tax base. So I'm gonna be recommending that no matter what. In fact, in next month, the city council is gonna study lodging tax. It's gonna be on their agenda next month.
Okay. Transportation sales tax, that is voter approved.
Not at the point.
From 0.1 to 0.2, yes.
Yeah. And then the B and O tax.
Yeah.
Which it's already at 1, or at least that's in the plan. Okay. Okay, so. Is there any more debate that we want to have about what's in and what's out for our recommended scenario?
Compared to this,
Yeah, so, well, I guess we can. Where do we want the cutoff to be?
Sorry. This, can you tell what's in and what's out of your thing?
Anything that has a 1, so I set the score threshold here
I remember that.
to drive, and so like, if we want to make the cutoff at 2.5 here,
Right.
then I'll just set this to 2.5. So the questions for the group are there any of these rankings that we want to debate and try to say, I want this one down because I want it out of plan, but I want, as Rob demonstrated so well, if he were on our task force, he would say, I want this to be at least a 2.5 so that it gets in. So is there any other rankings that we feel like are getting in the wrong spot that we want to try to debate?
To answer, I hope, maybe can we agree on the score threshold first? Because that would define what's in, what's out.
Sure.
The way I ranked, not saying, is 3, yes, please, yes. 2, sure, if we need to, but supportive of. 1, really, if we have to, but not fan of, and 0, please, God, no. And so because of that, with the 1, 2, 3 approach, the way I would consider my own threshold, which applies to nobody else, would be anything above a 2.1 would be generally supportive. And then afterwards, it would be a ranking, it would be a prioritization over time of, well, if we are above, we can let go of lower ranked scores.
Yeah, so so the way that I had laid out the scoring, and I think my descriptions got lost. But 3 was pursue as a priority.
Uh-huh.
2 is pursue as a secondary priority. 1 is last resort, and 0 is do not.
But therefore 2 is pursue, and so.
Yeah.
That means that anything that's 2 or above is a yes.
And so, and the other, what we can do, again, we can present scenarios where we can say, here's our ideal scenario. And if we don't get voter approval for these public safety ones, which I think a lot of us want to pursue, then we dip into those secondary. So we say anything above a 2 is on the table, but let's try to get these first. And we only go down the list as far as we need to make sure that the lines don't cross. I think is probably to achieve our goal. We shouldn't be trying to do more than is necessary to achieve the goal.
Agreed.
Like, obviously, the council can do whatever they want. They can look at our list and say, I want to go down to 1.5. Like, that's their prerogative, but what they asked us to do is lines don't cross, so we only need to go down until, but,
And Rob can do that too.
yeah, Rob can and will.
Because we're just giving it to him and then he gives it to the council.
Is that you have something?
Okay, so your question.
Uh-huh.
So, for the CAP program, 59 people did something in there, and 29 said decrease, and the average amount was 140,000. 17 said no change. 13 said increase, an average of 43,000 increase. So the two numbers are even, increase versus no change, increase, no change is a total of 30, and then decrease is 29. That's helpful.
Oh,
I heard 30 is bigger than 29, so.
Slam dunk.
Yeah.
it's not statistically significant within the not statistically significant sample size, yet, right? Okay.
Right.
Plus, again, as I put in my email, I think it's really, I agree that there were lots of people who either in the town hall or in the balancing act tool spoke not necessarily in favor of climate action plan, but what I heard as to why they didn't care about climate action plan was either actually unrelated to climate action plan altogether, or it was a gross misunderstanding of what climate action plan should do based on what they heard in the name. So I think while I'm definitely opposed to reducing climate action plan, I think there's a need, and that's more for you guys, to have an education on what is the role of the climate action plan in the climate action plan manager, because it is vastly misunderstood.
Sure, I got a lot of that. People who just don't.
Well, for them, climate, so I saw more than one comment where climate action plan is, well, that's ridiculous. Kenmore shouldn't try and change climate change, reverse climate change, which is great because that's not what the CAP manager's job is. If it was, yes, it would be a waste of money, but it's not that. So it's, we shouldn't
I
be.
think there might be some political undertone with Let's Go Washington, I-2117, with repealing the climate action plan on the state level, so people might convolute kind of what the city is doing, which is kind of the same path with what an initiative that somebody put on the November ballot.
How can I say? That would require a level of knowledge of the electoral program that I think is above the feedback I heard. I never heard, hey, we're doing it at state level, let's not do it at city level. But I did hear a climate change doesn't exist, or why is Kenmore trying to reverse climate change on its own?
We don't have any CAP related
No, of course.
items on here, so I just want to, yeah, let's stay on task. We've got enough ahead of us without,
Sure.
okay, so based on kind of the discussion, what I propose is let's look at getting to the questions of.
Two I wanted to advocate for. We're below the rankings.
Yes.
Are we still in that part or no?
Yeah, so what I was gonna recommend is let's look at everything above a 2. Is there anything above a 2 that anybody says we should move this from pursue as a priority or pursue as a secondary priority. And we should, and you want to advocate for it being below that line and saying only as a last resort. Is there anything 2 and above that you want
You
to?
go first.
I don't have anything to choose.
Okay,
So the insurance, I feel I don't care. The only thing is I remember the conversations we had is that they would have a low chance of happening or yielding any net revenues, but which is why we put it.
it's 0.
So
it's.
So it's more, it's kind of, I'd give it a 1 as in, sure, why not?
So I think that this is probably, like, we have this operational efficiency item,
Yeah.
$100,000. And so if there are savings here, then that would go toward
Sweet.
Rob's goal of getting 100,000.
But yeah,
So we could just delete this line, I think, and just have it as an item to say this, of the things that we discussed, this was a big line item that maybe there could be some savings.
Works for me. I just don't want the city to be spending time on that because we discussed the fact that, unlikely to do anything in the end.
Yeah.
I think it also initiated the conversation of, would it be best to go at least partially or fully self-insured, which I don't think had been really addressed.
Yeah. I don't know, do we want to talk about that or make any assumptions about it separate from Rob's directive to go find $100,000 of operational efficiency? I feel like it's best kind of left up to them to say, is this worth the time? Do we think?
For me, that works.
Okay. Okay, anything else on the down to the 2 and aboves? Okay, now, Vincent.
Thank you. I want to advocate for 2 things. I want to repeal the admissions tax on line 13 or 97. Because I think that, again, we're trying to be long-term and we know that will only affect 2 businesses in the city.
Mhm.
That was number 1. And I think that the city needs to demonstrate its willingness to balance its real estate holdings. I heard a lot in town hall. I hear a lot about the concept of why are we buying lots of land? And I'd like to either know how the post office plays into our long-term economic development, or I would advocate for its sale.
Okay, so let's start with the admissions tax. I'm with you on that one. Oh, your score was 0. I'm gonna put a 3.
Yeah,
For
it's
your-
supposed to be a 3.
Okay,
I think he reversed that, and I don't know if everybody went back and redid their votes.
okay, so let's just do
Yeah, put me as a 2.
You'll be a 3?
Yeah.
Okay, and then Katrina,
I'll put it too.
a 2, okay. Okay, I think that puts us, that solves that problem. Okay, so that means that this will now be included in our recommendations. Okay, and then you had another one? Sorry, which, you said what it was, I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, I
Post
think
office.
we can't.
Oh, land.
If there's not a long-term economic reason that we own a post office building, then there's no reason to hold it. I recognize that real estate values increase over time, but they also come with administrative cost and insurance cost. And if we were to sell that, Rob indicated there's companies that buy post offices, our citizens don't lose any services, and we take our equity out of that building and we put it back into maybe some other piece of land over on that side of 520.
Can I tell you a little bit more about the post office?
Sure.
It's really good timing because the lease expires summer of next year. And we're already in talks with them about extending it another 5 years plus a 5-year option at their discretion. So we're about, in the coming weeks, we're gonna be taking it to council to ask the council if they want to lock it in for another 10. The lease talks about the ability for the city to sell it and incorporate it into a larger redevelopment. And then we get about 60,000 a year rent from it, gross, including triple nets. And the rent increase that would go up by about to about 65,000 starting next year. We have expenses though associated with that. I can't tell you what they are, but like we've had to put a new roof, we've had to redo the HVAC system. There's other issues associated, the groundwater contamination about once a year, we have to pay a lawyer and a groundwater expert to advise us on the cleanup. And that's $2,000 every year. And so I'll just be conservative and say we probably, we have a property management company that gets a little bit of money because they collect rent. We have the typical landlord costs. So I'll just be conservative and say we probably net around 30 grand a year on that thing. Strategically, it's nice to own it because it's a piece in the downtown puzzle. And so if there was a developer that ever started assembling property for redevelopment right there, like that strip mall, we could say, we're a willing seller. We can throw our property into the mix and make it even more viable. So that's a reason to hold the post, to continue to hold it, to the city to own it. I'm not advocating, I'm just telling you,
But we have an indication that that's happening in the near future.
no indication. Yeah, the property owners are all there, are hold long-term. We have begged and pleaded for them to try to sell. They won't budge, they're hold real
This is a
estate.
1960s building.
Yeah. And then there's two other properties, probably one though, that are in play. One is the Shell property now that Plymouth isn't going there. Council wants to have a discussion about what to do with that. And then there's the Cozy that we demolished recently. Can I tell you one quick scary story? So just last week,
Oh, yeah.
our maintenance workers were putting quarry spall down.
Yeah.
To stabilize the site. And a car was heading westbound on 522 in the wrong direction. Collided with a car that was going in the right direction, flew in the air, did Dukes of Hazzard, and lands 10 feet away from my maintenance worker on the Cozy site.
That black car.
That would have totally thrown
Yeah,
away
so-
our
so-
budget for the next 5 years.
And the maintenance worker.
And I absolutely see the value in the city playing that role. But
Yeah. Well, so as far as the post office, our public works is currently using part of that, right?
Yeah, we are in the backside of the post office, but when our operations center gets built in a couple of years from now, we'll get out. And then we could potentially have another tenant that back. Get a little bit of money, not much.
So now, depending on how the space utilization is up here, is that an option as a backup office space then also in a couple of years? Maybe?
I doubt it. I
Okay,
hadn't thought of it as such. And
yeah, I wasn't sure how full you were here.
yeah,
There's no windows.
Yeah.
Probably not.
probably just store a bunch of crap, which we don't need to do.
But in general, I thought it's a good idea for the city to maintain some ownership of property in town, just to take advantage and be part of, and have a say in what redevelopment would look like. What Rob, you're saying here is that specifically for a post office, there's likely, in the long term, it's gonna be long term for redevelopment down there. So the value of that diminishes in my mind. So I would say if we determine that the properties we own today are not going to be significantly in play for redevelopment to give us that kind of leverage in a reasonable amount of term, okay, sell it. What I would hate to see happen is that proceeds for that get sucked into the general fund and used to subsidize operating expenses. If we said that, yeah, we're owning these properties or not, or we're just investing for these properties in order to be able to have strategic funds available for the future. So I think I suggest that we recommend that if we sell, those dollars go into the strategic fund for future investment.
Agreed.
And then, which one of the Lake Point financials that you might have seen in the appendix of that memo? I'm showing the sale of the Shell property at 1.5 million in 2026 to help with Lake Point.
Yeah, to me, that's a very legitimate use.
Right.
That really, we're just shifting our investment from one sort of development to a different type of development, which is gonna have long-term value. That's smart business.
Yeah, one strategic to another strategic.
So is there anything different that you think that we should communicate to the council as far as like our recommendations?
I recommend we sell the post office.
And what would you do with the money? Would you put it, help it with the, have it help the operating?
No, put it in the strategic operating.
Okay.
Again, it's more in my mind, it's equal parts dollars and perception. The idea that the city's buying property, there is confusion that I've heard, at least at the town hall, about what we're doing, why we have these properties, why do we buy them, what's gonna happen with them. So I think that is, to Mike's point, if there isn't a vision for how the post office is gonna fit into the puzzle of the economic development, we're better off taking our equity out and using it in something that has a nearer term return.
And to protect these funds going forward, I think, our recommendation, what I would like to see is a recommendation that the city council look at some rules around the strategic opportunity fund. What do we use those funds for? I'm not aware that we defined that very well. And it's probably intentional, so
We have
some flexibility, but
We have a
probably.
policy on it in our budget. I'm happy to get it. That's a little bit off track because it's not. But yeah.
I envision that in my model, I envision that as part of refueling the strategic opportunities fund.
So, how much is the post office, the value of the property? Like if we were to sell it?
So back in the mid 2010s, we thought we could get $500,000 for it. Prices have gone up, but they've also come down in the last couple of years. So I don't know, maybe 700.
Yeah, so if it's $700 and we're netting 30K a year, then that's like 5-6% return on investment in any given year. And my view of properties like that is if there's a better use for it, like Lake Point or something like that, where it's like, hey, we've got a opportunity in front of us that we want to jump on, and so we need to get funds to get that, then that's great. We can do that. And if there's enough reserves in the general fund, then you can use the reserves in the general fund and then sell the property to backfill it, right? So like if there's enough room in the general fund, then you can jump on those opportunities and give yourselves. But I think personally, I think that there is tremendous value in holding properties like the Shell property and the post office because it's part of our downtown core. It is so hard when there is an opportunity to develop like the downtown, like say 10 years from now, that strip mall, they are ready to sell. And if we don't have the post office, we don't own that property, then that opportunity may come and go, and we may not be able to like actually.
I hear you, man, but there's a lot of assumption in there. We're asking people to put more money into the coffers. We're asking for bigger blue bars. We're about to go ask for a lot of blue bars for Lake Point.
But it doesn't, but having it on the balance sheet when it's getting a decent, like, yeah, it's 6 to 7%, but like that's pretty.
We're not in business. There's no short-term opportunity. What's the plan?
But I think that the city has a unique and exclusive role in driving the culture and the development, like a vision for the culture and development of the city.
Right,
And
and we don't have that for that post office. We have a wait and see, maybe something will happen. It's not part of a vision right now. It's just something we own because it used to be town hall.
But is it reasonable to think that over even an extended period of time, that would never redevelop? I mean, eventually, I think you have to accept the fact that we are going to become more densely populated. There is going to be redevelopment. That is a prime redevelopment spot. To the extent that we own that property, and I think Jeff is referring to, that gives us some control and input into how that development comes about. It also gives us a way to tap into some value that grows outside of the structural deficit.
Right.
You're not only going to get the annual income off of that, which may be 5%, which isn't bad long term, but you're also going to get the appreciation of the value of the property over time. In addition to that ability to be able to influence what goes in to the city. So to me, that's the value of it.
Right. I said it might be,
You haven't
not a
made
real
that
estate company,
assumption.
so.
You think it's going to be leverage, in a reasonable amount of time or not? You believe it is, you hold it, if you don't, yourself.
So I took us all the way on a tangent with Cap, so I recognize the irony here, trying to bring us back. But I think we seem, or this is what I've heard, is that people agree that if we were to sell the property, then it wouldn't be to fund the general fund. It would be to allocate either directly or indirectly into the Strategic Opportunities Fund. And therefore, whether this is sold or not, it does not address the lines crossing or not. And so, but I have heard many times in public hearings, et cetera, people bringing up the properties. What are we doing with these properties? So a solution, and let me know if you agree, would be we don't address this here because in any case, it's not addressing our revenues versus expenses. But part of our recommendations might be to ask the council to clarify their strategic intentions and regularly do so with regards to their properties, so that we know what we're gonna do with those properties, and we know that people are checking in on that.
And I think one thing, so there's two charges, right? One is lines crossing and the other one is build reserves. What Vin's recommending would build reserves. So one could argue that that is within your mission. But you guys are really constrained on time. What I recommend is you cut off this conversation right now and take a vote on it and then move on.
Yeah, I'm totally comfortable with that.
So can you guys wanna?
Okay, so if I were to write this paragraph in the memo, I would say something to the effect of, the properties that the city holds are meant for economic opportunities, and driving, a specific development of key areas in the city that benefit the community as a whole. And the city should evaluate whether the current property holdings are serve that purpose. And
Here's your
should consider-
paragraph, but it doesn't address the recommendation. So I'll just call for a vote. Who would support us recommending selling the post office? All in favor? All opposed? The motion failed.
All right, moving on.
Okay.
Thank you. That was a good discussion.
Okay, so, and then tangential, one item that actually isn't on the list, but I want to, we talked about a little bit, but I want to add to the list, is I think that we should add expense for hiring a economic development position, someone specifically intended to evaluate properties, evaluate these strategic opportunities. And I don't know if that's a general fund or what have you, but I think wherever the money comes from, I think it's going to be an essential position with Lake Point coming up with other development opportunities. I think that we'll be more successful if we have someone who actually understands relationships and things like that. So
Somebody who can do
grant writing, seeking out developers and partners, and that understands kind of the environment of the area, that kind of thing.
Working with the existing business community.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to some of the conversations that we had with some of your staff. And I said, hey, like, do you ever talk, like you do these permits for all of these developers. Do you ever talk to them about what their plans are or opportunities? And no interest, no, of course we don't do that. And I think it would be really good to have somebody who is able to have those conversations. And yeah.
No, at the last meeting, Rob was talking about if we had another 0.5 FTE that we would add to your temporary employee, I think it was, then keep them on or something.
Yep, so the lodging tax would pay for half that person. But then still have to figure out a way to pay for the other half, yeah.
So if the other half was this economic development.
I mean, like, I don't think that you could really do that as a part-time. I think you need somebody who has the skills, somebody who's gone to business school or some other it like has education and experience. And so I would view it at the same tier that we hired our human services, human housing services manager and the CAP manager, someone at that same caliber.
Especially as you're asking, what I understand, you're asking for someone who can do the strategic thinking, but also the tactical writing.
Yeah.
And be able to be split both ways. That would be hard on half an FTE time.
And this, you know, the lodging tax and someone, you know, the temporary person that that the lodging tax would pay for, I think that would be a natural, like, you know, direct report sort of thing. But I think we've talked about sort of these longer term, like, let's solve the budget, what you were saying, solving the slope of the line a little bit by driving some of this economic development. I think that is something that should be considered as a first step. So,
Can we afford it?
I mean, you know, somebody like that would be probably, you know, 150 to 200,000 salary plus benefits. And so, so if we look at our 2.3, we've got 500K in 2030 to play with. So 200,000 would take off, would bring that down to 300,000.
And you're waiting until 2030 for that FTE?
No, not necessarily. We could do it in 2025 or 26.
Looking at
but it
what
would
was
be-
the minimum,
Right.
Yeah.
would it turn us red anywhere?
Yeah, and it wouldn't. Even if you do it in 2025 and add, then you're still in the green here. So put it to a vote. Is this something that we should consider recommending to the council? All in favor? Okay. So I will add a line to the budget strategies.
Maybe
And
just a little bit more discussion. I'm not
Sure, yeah.
Just post hoc. I think the term economic development will not sit well with some folks in the community. And I think we may need a wider vision here than just economic development. And just what does economic development mean? What I think we're really talking about here is, do we have a strategic vision for Kenmore that incorporates both the economic vision, but also other aspects of the city? Because these things cross over. Now, one of the things I pointed out in an email I sent out to you folks earlier, if we develop Lake Point Park, that's going to increase the economic value of the property around it. It's going to create an economic as well as a social benefit for the city as a whole. I would think this position would be exactly where you want to have that type of work considered. So it goes beyond, I think, the traditional economic development. How do we bring in more business?
Yeah.
And how do we improve our relationship with our business community? It's more about, what do we see Kenmore being 10, 20 years down the line? And what are the things that need to happen? How do we make those things happen? Particularly, how do we make those things happen? That's what so I think there needs to be some art into defining this position that we're not going to do here tonight.
Yeah.
But I'm on board with, I worry a little bit about, you know, we're a city of just barely 25,000, almost 25,000. And we're taking on something that cities that are many, many times our size would have in their portfolio. I'm always a little concerned about overreaching here, but I don't know how we get to that better future without this.
I see Kenmore and there's a ton of opportunity here, right? There's the Lake Point, you drive down 522, or, you know, like, we have so many great parks and water features and like location, and tons of parking lots, empty parking lots, like ridiculous numbers of empty parking lots. And I have to believe that there's an opportunity there to build the kind of density. And the great thing about Kenmore too is we have an excellent foundation of kind of your walkable downtown, right? Like, we have some elements here that is already set a foundation that if we can just kind of like expand and build a few more pockets of like the little downtown town square that we have, and build you know, like have a similar spot over by St. Vincent's or, Lake Point, or like these little urban village, town square type things. There's there's all these services that are close by, the Burt Gilman Trail, all these parks and all these features that if we can get momentum and direct it, that over the next 10 to 20 years, we could see a really incredible, so anyway,
Yeah,
that's my
it's
pitch.
not gonna grow organically out of the ground down the road.
Yeah.
It's going to have to be, and you don't want it. Because what you'll end up with is 50 different versions of what Kenmore ought to be.
Right.
And I don't think that's a road we want to go down to. And it's something that I think our city administration has a real feel for, it wants to happen. But I don't know that we have the bandwidth to help them do that. So that's what I see here. This gives us an opportunity to be able to do that work that leads to a more integrated vision that we can actually execute on.
Okay.
get more dentists.
I'm starting to get a lot of lawn care since people going through, dropping their kids off on the way.
Hey, while we're making the budget problem worse. So I don't know if it's on my memo, but there's also pretty strongly demonstrated need for human services navigation. Did you see that in my memo? And so we mostly finished the human services needs assessment. And that was a glaring thing, pretty glaring thing is there's lots of services out there, but people either don't know about them, don't know how to access them or can't get to them. And so there's and they're not in Kenmore. And so there's a pretty good argument to be made for a navigator, or a more commonly understood word is caseworker. But and what I think would be kind of a good sweet spot or special sauce or whatever you want to call it is we've got this idea to get back a rebate, a property tax. Well, let's say that if you want the rebate, you got to come and talk to the navigator who will administer the rebate program. And also at the same time, because you're coming for the rebate, he or she will connect you with other services you didn't know about. So I had in there 225,000. That's a number. It's probably not going to be that in the first couple of years, but because our revenues grow so flat, I kind of gave it some buffer. But the idea, I've been talking to Tammy, our human services manager, and the idea would be to contract that with either Hope Link or Center for Human Services or a place like that, and give them a physical location to be here, so that people don't have to go to Hope Link in Kirkland or somewhere in Seattle or Shoreline or whatever. So so this is your decision. You can see what I'm recommending in the memo. I'm just laying it out for you. I will not be offended either way.
Okay, so that is incremental to the utility tax rebate program.
That'd be another 225.
Okay. So what if we propose this? I think if we sorry, 225, and that would cover the cost of the individual and the impact to
The contract, because it would be outsourced.
there would be a corresponding decrease in property tax for giving relief for these programs, right?
Doesn't work that way. with the
Okay.
county. So they assess an amount that they're gonna collect from the entire city. And that's what they collect, and then they adjust the rates accordingly based on whatever rebates are given.
Okay.
So it doesn't affect the property tax bottom line. But the 225 would include both the navigator and the administration of the rebate program. So you could knock that 250 down to like 225. I had 220 and 225, I think, for the two.
This is something I professionally have some knowledge of. I believe there's some state and federal dollars that could help offset that as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think you could easily go for some state matching funds or Medicaid administrative costs.
Interesting.
That's something we could talk about outside. It's speculative, but
Yeah, and King County Public Health also could have, I mean, they have the people for that, they're just not located in Kenmore yet. If they were, they'd be paying for it.
We could put them in the back of the post office.
You kid, but the privacy offered by lack of windows actually might be seen as a bonus.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I was curious about that with, so if they sign up for like the Kenmore rebate, are we requiring them to also sign up for like some federal and state ones? Is that,
No, but they'd be pitched, so it'd be, hey, did you know that, by the way, because of your situation, you probably would qualify for this too?
right, I'm just saying, it's like, we would rather them use the federal dollars first before they use ours and the state dollars. So that's why I'm thinking, instead of coming just to Kenmore to get the money from us, we would rather them get the state and federal dollars first.
We would encourage them to, but I wouldn't want to make it difficult for them to get our 200.
Right.
We'd want it to be pretty easy and just like we did with direct cash assistance under the pandemic. We made it really easy for folks to get that money.
Well, I was also thinking, anytime we're doing like the town hall, any of these task forces, there's always discussion that we may not be getting all the people we need and all the DEI lens on this. And so would it be possible to add into that they can opt in for like a special mailing list from the city? So they would get special invitations to please,
Yeah,
either via text or email, whatever they prefer, to please participate?
that's a great idea. Love it.
okay, so what I did is I just added a line, so I changed the utility tax rebate program to 225, human services case manager / program navigator, -225. So it's a high impact, it's 200,000, high potential of success. This mitigates the concern with regressive tax programs. Why don't we just,
Implementation here?
implementation as a success consideration?
No, that
What
we,
do you anticipate?
Rob?
The council approves the budget. Let's just say
26.
26 to have time to get it set up.
Okay, and numbers.
Because we still have ARPA money, right, for 24 and 25?
We have $2.4 million left of money that's been indirectly made possible by ARPA.
That's all.
Like that. Have to avoid audit issues, the way we say things.
Special project.
Katrina?
Hmm?
0 to 3,
Oh, 3.
and Michael? 3, and Tiff?
3.
And that's it.
So is this something that can be implemented like through a website or something? Like people go to the Kenmore website and then navigate through these services as well? Is that something that's already there?
Usually they.
I think that would be part of it, but the idea would be a real person that can walk them through. They would have office hours here at City Hall.
Okay, and then people are just kind of coming up, grabbing a ticket and kind of waiting, kind of.
I see as an outreach, like the person will be able to work with local
Yeah.
nonprofit churches. They may be able to really not spread their wings by utilizing partnerships in the city too.
Yeah, I'm all for it, and I professionally work tangentially in that space as well. The only reason why I put 2 is because I too think that it might be more cost neutral than we're putting it to do. Because there are organizations that could do that potentially even for free, assuming there is a conversation that happens with Kenmore. So there are modalities where maybe it doesn't have to be in our line, but I think it should happen.
Great. Let's see, I think I did 36. Oops.
It's
Okay, great.
Super, line 94, we're saying, case worker,
Caseworker, sure.
yeah, manager
Yep,
brings up a whole other.
yep. You're
That
right.
just up to pay another $100,000.
Okay.
Where are the lines now? Before we go into what we want to see on top.
Okay, so we're at. Um,
No, we're still good.
so if we do sort of our two tier, let's say 2.5. And then we do 2.1. So we're giving a lot of ammunition to solve the problem. Oh, actually, I need to make sure that it's actually jumping up in here. If I put it 6, this is not revenue, this is cost. Oops. It's going to be cost reduction, but don't let that fool you. Just means it needs to go into the other line. Or actually,
Reduction?
the
Expense.
yeah, I know, it's just the formula. Like I said, don't let it fool you. The rebate program, that is actually the reduction of revenue, right, Rob? Okay, so this one is a revenue item.
Checks.
It's just whether it rolls up into the revenue line or the expense line for my formulas to work. Okay, so that's,
Not regret.
yeah.
So Rob, with the councilmanic taxes, are those just raised per need or just to pay for that particular area, or what goes into that again?
Can you pick an example?
Like surface water?
Surface water utility tax?
Yeah,
That would just go straight into the general fund to spend on whatever this general purpose the city wanted to spend it on.
and then what's the kind of cadence as far as raising that, or I don't know if it's ever lowered, but what generally triggers, oh, let's raise it to 7%? And do you guys have a vote on it? What drives that?
So you guys would recommend the percentage increase, and if the city council agreed, then we'd bring forward an ordinance when the time came. And the council would adopt the ordinance, and then it would go into effect a few months later.
Oh, okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So good.
Okay, so yeah, it's a little bit, we increased it a little bit at the 2.5 level, and the 2.1 level
Where's the MPD at? I like the idea of the MPD.
the MPD, I believe is
96.
One.
Oh,
96, is that where it is? Okay, there it is, so 2.1.
Of 2.5.
So it would be included in the 2.1, but it right on the threshold.
We feel that's a negative potential ramification on Lake Point to have yet another economic ask, independent of the Lake Point economic asks.
So I think, and tell me if anybody disagrees with me here, but I think that the 2.1 score is actually sort of indicative of sort of our hesitation and concern with like how it plays into Lake Point versus other things yeah, we're supportive of the concept generally, but our hesitation is generally around like, is this the right timing? Do we want to hold off until and do Lake Point all at once, or those kinds of things? I think that the reason it's scored low is because of that, not because we don't support it generally, but because there's that kind of confusion around it.
I do agree with that, but right now we're counting on over $1 million in revenue from the model.
At this threshold. Yeah, so again, kind of like if we kind of tick down and we say, okay, we're gonna meet our goal of the line and nothing more, and we go 2.2, there it is, 2.2, that's the cutoff to make sure that this, and then we can mess around with the timing to make sure that, you know, we're not overextending. But so then the cutoff would be so the MPD would not be included, but the public safety sales tax would be included. This would be the cutoff for our ideal scenario.
For me, the MPD, why I said I liked it is because I see Lake Point as part of the MPD and not, but one thing that we've heard consistently is that parks are a strength of Kenmore, and therefore there needed to be allocated, there needed to be financial support for the parks, Lake Point or otherwise. And I think in the memo you said, you put, Rob, I think for me, the option that resonated most was option 2, where Lake Point was part of the MPD. I obviously don't want a separate MPD for a Lake Point, and I don't think Lake Point should exist if there was the MPD outside of the MPD. So,
Yeah, you can only have one NPD,
good,
period, and so
perfect.
it would have to serve both purposes.
So here's the MPD at 350.
Mhm.
And what Rob gave us as the preliminary costs, the costs associated with the evaluations and things like that would be about 500,000 starting in 2027. And so in my mind, what I would present as the scenario is I would say, okay, council, we did our work. Everything 2.2 and above is what we recommend as our kind of ideal scenario. And then I'm going to tie this MPD levy to these Lake Point costs and say, if you are going to go ahead with this $500,000 of incremental costs, then it may be worth considering the MPD levy. Now if we were to include these 500,000 costs, because they're only 2 years, these 2 years, and it doesn't affect 2030, we can actually include this. If I put 1 here and we go and check our graph, it's actually just going to decrease. You see how it bumps up and then the slope kind of goes back down. That just means that we lose a little bit of the surplus in these years. And so we can pay for these costs out of the reserve. But if the council wants to tie these costs to this levy, then they can potentially do that. But I was kind of, I actually preferred the idea that we focus on CAPE and public safety as a way to get our general fund, and then keep their decision of an MPD, of Lake Point, of those kinds of things a little bit independent so that they can evaluate it in separate ways.
I agree.
Yeah.
For me, why MPD is much more palatable is because MPD addresses a strategic wish to have just funding for our parks without giving guidance on whether or not we as a group want to invest in Lake Point, while we personally might as individuals, because that's more future looking. That is, I feel, not, at least not my remit. And so that's why, as long as MPD is above Lake Point as a whole, I think strategically that fits better.
I think I was here at the town hall too, is that we're still paying for parks with the walkways and waterways bonds.
Yep.
For a number of years more, so we are investing in our parks, but we're still paying off the last time, yeah.
On line 100, where, show me when the 500 is taken.
I did that wrong. I said it in 2026.
So it's 25 and 26.
25 and 26. I think I had it starting in. Okay, so we'll do,
You had 500 twice.
yes, you said for 2 years. Is that not correct?
Or so.
Yeah, to be conservative, let's do that. Who's gonna be 500 over 2 years?
Okay,
But you know what? I think that's conservative, just in case we don't get that grant.
okay.
And really on our priority list, that MPD levy would be the 4th time we went to voters.
For an MPD?
Yeah, because we have the 2 levies plus the public safety sales tax.
That's a good point.
4th time going to the voters.
Oh, it's only one levy, we
It's the
have
amount.
two
Oh, yeah.
amounts.
So it'd be the
So-
3rd time going to the voters.
No, good point. I didn't factor that one.
Yeah, so the levy lid lift for public safety this is 1. And then,
That's 2.
no, this is
No,
1,
one.
because
That
it's
was
the
one.
same, it's the same thing. We're just going to
Right.
16 cents instead of 32. I don't know why that's the wrong color. And with this.
Because you copied the lines.
Yeah, so the MPD would be the 3rd distinct voter item
Right.
The public safety sales tax and the levy lid lift for public safety. Those would be two separate
Hmm.
checkboxes, kind of the same narrative because it's both public safety. But yeah, you're right. That would be the third.
One of the things to keep in mind about the PD is the time. What we're talking about when we talk about the 350 is a small levy that will generate 350K in new tax revenue, which would offset expenses in the general fund. I'm not sure where that offset is in this model. But also, if you don't do this soon, you're going to be pushing off any decision on Lake Point and being able to fund Lake Point. You can't fund Lake Point until you've already established the metropolitan.
With a year gap, yeah.
So if you went initially established, make the investment to get that up there right now, take the offset in the general fund of 350,000. You've got a head start, and you're gonna cut your delivery time on being able to actually pull the trigger on the Lake Point, which you wouldn't be able to do because you'd have to wait till you got the park district done.
Yeah.
And you'd have to go through a lift levy then anyway.
You have to have a levy voted, approved in order to have an NPD then?
No, you establish the MPD first, by voter approval. In the ballot language, it says what the max rate can be,
Right.
and
But-
then the board actually sets the rate later by board action. As long as it's at or below that rate that was established in the ballot language.
Okay, so you can't just approve an NPD and get it approved and say, we'll come to you later for vote for funds for this? It all starts at once, all at once.
You can establish an MPD. Then the board gets established the next year and they can keep the rate at zero for as long as they want.
Right, okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
If we did that MPD option with the 5 cents, I want to make it absolutely clear to the voters that a second rate for Lake Point would be coming. And
Mhm.
because I don't want to be accused of hiding the ball, right? So people will be crystal clear that this is the first rate and there's a second rate coming a year or two later.
I'm just going through these one by one and kind of taking a look. This one, the let temporary employees contract end. So this is there any, based on what Rob said, which is that he would like to keep this employee, I can't remember if this is one or two employees.
One. You said one.
Is it just one or two that you were?
It's one.
It's two people, just one FTE?
Well, yeah, the position, the position we're talking about is the person that we hired for farmer's market.
Yeah.
That expires at the end of this year.
Okay, and, okay, so the two things that you are going to recommend independent of what we do, and I just want to make sure that we're in agreement of what we are recommending, to the extent that it is in contrast to what Rob has said he's going to recommend. But we have the, wherever it is, the lodging tax as 0.75, so it's below it's in the last resort category. And we are including the savings from those individuals, letting those contracts lapse.
How are those two things related?
Because Rob said that he is going to recommend doing the lodging tax and getting that $50,000 of revenue and using that to pay for these employees to continue employment with Kenmore, with the city of Kenmore.
Yeah, so, lodging tax is gonna get us anywhere between 100 and 150,000. I'd need somebody to run tourism once we establish a lodging tax. We think it's a half-time job, thus the 50,000. Then you'd say, okay, well, what about the other 50 or 100 grand that's left over? Can't you use that to? No, by state law, we have to spend it on heads in beds, promoting overnight stays. So the remaining amount, we would have to spend on, advertising, promoting the lodge and Kenmore Air and things like that. So that's why I'm saying there's only about 50,000 available that could help our situation.
So, so this is how it's rolling up. Is there any, are we good with this? Is this how we want to represent it? And let Rob have his own recommendations, different from ours? Or I just wanted to throw that out there.
I'm just curious, would that, if we go 2.2 and above like that, how many, actual cost reductions do we have in that 2.2? Because we wanted a balance, right?
Yeah, that was the primary reason why we had included those cost saving. Let's see,
Yeah.
so cost, it's a little bit hard. So streetlights is, so 70,000, let's just add these up. That's a cost add.
one.
There's 100,000. And
That one.
there's that one.
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah,
So-
that's it. So we have about 250 to 300,000
Yeah.
in cost reductions.
Please not there, so I lost my ally for the fireworks.
We've added $400,000 of expenses.
The addition.
Yeah, I think we.
Anybody wanna do the fireworks?
Combination of cost reductions and revenue, so that's all.
Yep. I mean, I'm comfortable with my recommendations based on my understanding, like my recommendations are my own. Like they have the feedback from the balancing act. They have the feedback from the town halls. I absolutely considered that feedback when I'm making my recommendations, but my recommendations are my own. So
Right.
that's kind of my point of view.
That's why there's none of us, and not just one.
And while we did increase costs to a certain extent, I think that is the trade-off for asking the taxpayers to pay more, is that we're asking you to pay more, but we're also factoring in, we're looking to the future and we're planning to better use that by using those specifically for those needs, at least for me, which is different than we're trying to do cost reductions, but yes, it is a net cost increase because we're doing something else.
Yeah, we're trying to plan for the sustainability.
But if someone wants to get rid of fireworks, I'm down. Just throwing it out there.
I wouldn't want to get rid of the event. I'm happy to ditch the fireworks, but I wouldn't want to get rid of the event.
See, you're already meeting me halfway.
Okay, all right, I'm not hearing a lot of,
Pointed that the Metropolitan Park District idea does not go above our threshold.
It does.
Call from the survey.
mm-mm.
Wait, sorry, I misunderstood that. What were you saying, sir?
Below the line.
2.1.
Yeah, to meet our goal.
Oh, yeah, but so we're, okay. Yeah, sorry, for me, the threshold of consider anything above a 2.1, just know that in the most bare bones configuration at 2.2, we're still cutting it.
So is it too late to change my vote on that?
No, not at all.
Change mine to 3,
On which item?
the Metropolitan,
Yeah, I absolutely can.
that make a difference?
It does make a difference.
I think that'll push it over the line.
At 2.22,
Where'd it go?
I saw.
But it's still the third vote we're going out to the public, so it's.
Sure.
Yeah,
I don't think
I would
personally
remind
it's
folks
fast.
that
And we're raising bill.
It was
Right.
very highly positively rated by the public.
That's what
Well,
changed
it was,
my
it was
mind.
actually very high on we want Lake Point, but when it got to will you pay for it was only like half and half.
That's not surprising.
Yeah,
It- With any levy increase, you have to go out and you have to remind the public why they're
Oh,
being
yeah.
asked to spend this money. And I think the things we picked are very good. I mean, one of
Oh,
the
yeah.
things that I think that we see levies going down in a lot of other cities is because they haven't specifically linked the dollars to what you're gonna get out of it.
Right.
And I think what we've picked here, public safety,
Yeah.
parks, recreation, this is what you're gonna get for these dollars. And how much is that PD district cost you? 5 cents per thousand. What do we figure it out? An annual for $40.
The first time we ask them, it's 5 cents per thousand.
Then it goes up to
We're gonna
400.
ask them again for like 30 cents per thousand.
Yeah, and they get to vote again.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can I
so,
just say one thing?
Yeah,
So
please.
That survey that we did, 54% said yes to Lake Point. Increasing their tax by $456 a year or 37 cents. We've rerun the numbers and it's gonna be much lower than that. It's probably gonna be around 25 cents or about $20 a month. So that could help. Lake Point.
$20 a year.
or, no, $20 a month.
Until
$20 a month, yeah. 20-ish.
Okay, so we're at 8:20. The way that this worked last time is we had a consultant that like, we basically had this conversation and then the consultant said, okay, I have what I need, and then went and wrote a memo for us. We don't have that. I feel like I can serve that role. I feel like I have a good understanding. I built the model, so I have a good understanding of that. And I've been trying to listen and get that from you all. And Katrina put together a great template for the memo that includes a lot of the discussion that we've already had around DEI considerations and the likelihood of success and those kinds of things. So now that we've had this conversation and we kind of have our thresholds, I feel like I'm in a place where I could potentially sort of take that role of the consultant and write a draft of the memo. We're a little bit under the gun because
We need it on Friday.
yeah.
No, you don't need your memo written by day after tomorrow. That would be too much to ask, unless it's already written, but what we were gonna do is just kind of capture this and we're doing just a 1-pager. So council can see what you're recommending, and then we would have a bar graph to show how it's changed from the lines.
Okay.
Incorporate your line graphs, actually.
Yeah.
Can you just show me implementation years one more time, especially on the voter?
Oh yeah, that was the other thing I wanted to check. Hold on a second. I'm going to go back to sorting this by. Okay, so we have our levy lid lifts. We're recommending up to 16 cents. Right now, we have them starting in 2025. Did we want to change that? We do have some room there because we have a surplus in 26 and 27.
Because the Senate is going to voters all this year.
Yeah,
That's
I would,
Well, just two of the levy limits, and the public safety sales tax would be next year.
okay, so if we say we go to the voters in 2025, that means the taxes come in 2026. Is that what we want to do?
well, I think in terms of messaging and understanding why we're doing it, the surge we saw is happening this year. And if we were to say, we'll do it in 2028, then the question is, wait, then why? We've managed it so far. I love the fact, I mean, tax increase, I do not love a tax increase, but I love the fact that this tax increase is directly connected to the issue we're having. I would want to connect that from a timeline perspective as early as close together as possible. So I think it just makes more sense to have it in 2025 because of that. And that's the sole reason why I say yes for now rather than later, but I'm ready to be convinced otherwise.
I agree.
Yes, my point is this, I'm actually agreeing with this now with the reserve is that since we know that we're building up more in the later years, why not see if we can push these to the later year when they actually need to be happening here.
I was saying we could also tier it, put it up, if it goes on the ballot now, tell them it's gonna be this much starting this year, and then we're gonna up it, and give people time to plan for that in their budgets themselves.
Or is that the levy lid lift?
Yeah.
So you can't do that with a levy lid lift. It's just a one-time bump.
Okay.
There is a multi-year levy lid lift that's allowed, but the state law says that for King County cities, there's a non-supplantation requirement on the multi-year levy lid lift.
Now they're just making up
Sound
words.
complaint?
Yeah.
Okay.
You guys know, so that means you'd have to pay for brand new programs with a multi-year levy
Oh.
lift, and that would,
In other words, don't do it.
yeah, so yeah, that's one time bump. Along the lines with what Tiff is saying, and maybe well, I better shut up because I'm not part of this committee.
Yes, you.
I'm with Tiff, push it out.
Yeah,
I don't
Gig
want,
Harbors went down 7 to 30% today, so.
yeah.
Wait, the
Big
what?
harbor property tax levy.
It didn't pass.
But we
70%
also want to
against.
try and fill
Wow.
the levy lid lift is not at the same,
Yeah.
on the same ballot as the public safety and sales tax.
So for example, if you want to do MPD and it goes into effect 2026, that means it needs to be on the ballot this November.
Yep.
And so do you want MPD and levy lid lift on the same ballot? Probably not.
No,
Yeah, well, public safety sales tax was before MPD levy.
I'm fine with pushing it out. I just think it makes it harder from a messaging perspective, because if we're saying, hey, in 2027, let's say, we're asking for X amount because of public safety, because of costs incurred, including the camera that we had in 2024. You guys managed fine for 3 years. What's the issue? Why now?
That's because we have $10 million in the bank.
No, sure, but it's just that extra work of messaging. That's my only, it's not even a concern. That's my only thought is, if we feel as though we can message it in a way that we could manage and now we need your contribution, fine, let's push it up.
Well, this is, I think, something the city council have to weigh in on and think about. I do think we're in a moment right now in terms of public safety. I think that is a high priority out there in the community. I'm surprised by Gig Harbor, but Gig Harbor seems surprising anyway. So I think we need to go definitely for public safety. I think the question is how much and when. But this is the moment to go for it, I think. This is the best chance you're gonna see, I think, to get that kind of increase for a number.
A couple differences with Gig Harbor. One, they only announced it 2 months ago, so
Yeah.
there's no time. Two, it's on an April election, which you guys know is different than general election. And then I need to find if it was for public safety or what it was for.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say it's equivalent. I'm simply saying it's
Yeah.
another example of
Yeah, it's-
voters'
it's-
appetite.
It's something to consider.
I think we would definitely want it, well, if we go November, it would be this year. So if we're gonna go with like a February ballot, next year would be better, because then the following year, we're gonna be competing with the school district levies and bonds as well.
I think when, from a voter's perspective, I mean, we need to factor that in. But ultimately, we need to do what's best for the budget. I don't like, to your point, having big blue bars.
Yeah, I think, yeah, well,
But, so I think if we can push it out. Again, if we feel as though, I have no issues pushing it out, as long as we feel we can realistically get it. I just feel that the best argument can be made today rather than 3 years' time.
But and that's something we can put in the memo, right? We can put it in the memo to say this is 2026. And the reason why we're putting 2026 is purely because of the recent increases in public safety, driven by the cameras, driven by the specific increases that we saw. And so we think that that's present. However, and we can point to the graph and say that this means that we are building up our reserves more than we necessarily intended, just because the timing of this, the opportune timing is now. And so, some consideration should be made for, the other thing that we can do is they can bank the property tax, like we can go to the voters now for public safety and say we want to do a levy lid lift, but they can bank the 1% increase. So they can say we're going to do a levy lid lift, but we're not going to increase the property taxes now. So we'll take advantage of the timing on the public safety, but the net impact to the budget and to the property tax bill is going to be relatively, or it won't be as significant. And And then they can use that banked capacity later. And so we get to the same end result when we get to 2030, but we're not building up as much of a reserve.
Could we also do, for instance, if we say the levy lift is 2026 as soon as possible because it addresses the needs we have. In that case, the public safety sales tax could be pushed out significantly further out because it's hey, we need a little bump, but we've asked you something. We don't want to do 2027 and then 2026 and hey, we're gonna hit you twice.
I feel like, I don't know, my opinion on this is that you should go to the voters for both items at the same time.
Mhm.
And the public safety sales tax is the use it or lose it. If we don't jump on it, then King County can jump in line.
Yeah, I think the reality is, the
Forgot about that.
voters, they're not gonna pay attention to, oh, this has been increased 2 years out. And so I don't really care that much about it. No, they're gonna see the whole package and they're gonna react to the whole thing.
Yeah,
So I think it really comes down to a discrimination of what do you think the sensitivity of in the acceptance of the voter community is out there. We're approaching this right now as finance folks.
Yep.
And we're saying what makes those numbers work out. I think this is not a financial numbers decision. This is a political calculus, and I think the city council is probably in a better position to weigh that and make that. So what I would say is, I think closer to what I think you're saying, Jeff, is let's put the whole thing out there. What we tell the city council is this is your option. This is what makes the numbers work. But there has to be a consideration about in order to make this happen. This is a heavy lift. You're gonna have to go to the voters, you have to do a lot of job voting to make
Yeah,
it
the
happen.
messaging and
So
everything.
make that decision.
also, the sooner we go to the voters, the sooner we find out if it passes. And so if it doesn't pass, then that means that the council can pivot and say, okay, we got to go down further on the list to the lower twos, the undesirables, the.
Call us all back here
Yeah.
next year.
Yeah, exactly. That's all I'm thinking.
No, I mean, we've got, like I said, they've got the surface water, they've got the utility, they've got the electricity. Where'd it go? We've got the electric utility tax for 400 grand, the, surface water utility tax increase. So there's if they don't get the 1.5 million from these three items, then they can make up for some of that difference with the ones that we've ranked as last resort. But if they find out that the voters don't approve that, then they have a couple years to say, okay, what do we want to do in response?
What if we change our recommendations to say, these are the recommendations, we leave it to you to decide the political calculus. But the model says that by 2020 X, this will have been implemented.
Yep.
You have until 2028 to get the lead levy passed. You have until 2027 to get the retail sales passed. If you want to go early, that's all yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
we might want to go early or on the sales tax just because we want to beat King County.
Yeah, that's,
But it also has two different messages. I mean, between the levy and the sales tax. I mean, the sales tax, the message is you're gonna pay it anyway. It's just gonna come to Kenmore instead of the county.
Mhm.
Whereas the levy, it's like, well, this really is an increase in what you pay.
okay. Okay, so I think what I'm gonna do is I will put these in as starting in 2028, to your point, to say that these need to be in by 2028, but you should consider putting them on the ballot earlier and maybe using banking your normal capacity and saving that for 2028, or, play that, figure out that calculus, what makes the most sense. But you've got buffer, you can delay this out as far as 2028 because there's reserves.
So then the MPD should be 2028 also, because
If you push out the timing, pushing out your ability to be able.
but just because it ranks lower than the others.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, but since it requires more time to do, if ever we want to do Lake Point before 2030,
Yeah.
we kind of have to do that earlier, even if it does rank lower.
Yeah, so if we vote on it in 2024, 2025, they set it up, 2026, we start getting revenue. And so that makes it so that 2026 or 2027 timeframe, we can strike the anvil if the Lake Point opportunity presents itself, I think is the rationale there. Any other timing considerations?
So what does the graph look like now?
Graph looks like this.
That looks really reasonable.
So this is because the slope, because we know that the slope of revenue is, that's what this bump does. It gets us that stair step. And so that means that if this is going up, climbing this way, and this is more flat, then that means if we get that bump in 2028, that's what gets us parity by 2030. And that-
Costs.
that's the levy lid lift timing.
That's when you're doing.
Yeah, that's what, yeah, so basically you have to get that bump by 2028 if you want to keep the lines crossing before 2030.
Yeah, can you just scroll down the column? To be honest, I just want to write down the expenses we're adding.
Yeah,
So
so
we're
that,
adding 225 on the utility rebate.
yeah,
Fifth, that's what's the 50? Surface water is not.
sorry, it's
Yeah.
red.
Right.
I need to fix that thing.
130 on the eliminate the admission tax.
Yeah.
And then we're also adding those two positions, right?
Yep,
So
there.
130 is a reduction of revenue.
130
The admission tax is a reduction of revenue.
Right.
Yeah, it's not
Still.
costs, the voters want that because we're not doing more taxes.
So it's 180. 225, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Can I read the Big Harbor ballot language too? Are you interested?
Yeah.
It just says for the purposes of public safety, streets and park maintenance, and other governmental services.
So
That
90%
sounds
of
very
it's going
general
to other.
So to your point, Mike,
Yeah, I think we can do a better job of selling it.
Yeah.
I think we've got really good arguments to support it. And I think that's what's gonna be the key. I think that's what sells it.
Yeah.
It's really in our ballpark to make it. We can make. I think the public is open to what we're asked, what we wanna ask. We just need to make it clear to them what the value is. If we could do that, that's within our control to do. But one thing, if you, Jeff, if you could go back to the graph for a minute. I'm not about to suggest anything different from this, but I do want to point out how close those lines are. If I learned anything in forecasting, is that whatever we're saying today is wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
So what, if we've got some blue bars out there that we can fall back on, and those dollars not being sucked into the operating fund, or something that's not on our list already, I'm okay. But I think if you have the bars, if you have those lines that close, that increases our risk.
Well, I'm
and
wondering
that's,
to keep us.
that's why this plan, if it goes to plan, means that we are more than double, even delaying the property tax increase, we're still more than double the reserve.
Yeah.
And so if something doesn't go to plan and costs go up more than expected or what have you, then we do have that buffer in the reserve and we'll come back in a couple of years to.
Well, and speaking of that point, I think, isn't this the third version of that graph we've gotten just since January, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
But I only
Actually,
mention,
we're helpful. Actually, we're very helpful.
I only mention this because I think that's what makes this graph important.
Yeah,
This backs up
yeah.
the apparent
This-
risk
we-
we may be taking.
Yeah, we're happy to ride this line because we've got a healthy.
I think maybe that leads into some discussion we've already talked about. So some of this money need to go into strategic opportunity fund, does it need to go into a rainy day fund? What if in that 3-4 year period, we have another COVID? What if we have something else we don't anticipate, there's anything upside down? With those lines as close as they are, we will be back here, in a much worse situation than much tougher than this.
well, makes a good point, because like, we started creating a public works department in 2019. So there was a large investment in equipment and all that, so do we have some kind of a backup plan somewhere, like if we need to suddenly replace that equipment? Things like that.
Well, you guys.
Okay. Do you build capital expenditure assumptions?
It's
into
amortized.
that?
Yes.
So we are, it's funded, we're getting a bond, right? So we're getting money that's gonna fund everything that we need for the Public Works Operations Center.
She's talking about equipment. So we have a equipment replacement reserve fund
Okay, we do that.
that we haven't talked about much.
Yeah.
But we routinely contribute into that fund, and that's the fund we purchase our vehicles and equipment out of.
Okay, and that comes like general fund money gets put into there when you have,
Yes.
right, so these kind of extra blue bars can, okay.
That's
But I assume there's also money in the plan for a bigger need than what's just an equipment fund for that new center. You know what I mean, like furnishing and all the stuff that goes with the.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
That's what I.
that's part of the budget of Public Works Operations Center.
Right, yeah, okay.
Okay, that actually makes me feel better. I was reading just recently that because of cash basis accounting, cities often run into these issues where, because they're not counting depreciation expense, that you can run several years not thinking that you're gonna have an expense, and then when that capital purchase comes up, but if you're kind of setting aside money into an equipment fund, then that's essentially the same as having a depreciation mechanic. So
You were reading Chuck Brown's article,
I was, yeah.
and he was talking about infrastructure.
Mhm.
And it's true, cities don't depreciate infrastructure or save up for it. Why? Because we get grants. Like, we didn't save up to pay for the bridge replacement because grants came in and paid for most of it. So that's the reality of cash basis accounting.
Yeah.
And if a large cargo ship hits it, then the government will pay for it.
It's almost like insurance more than, so, okay. Okay, is there any other comments? I would love to adjourn not super late, and then I will go home and spend 2 hours summarizing.
Great, thank you, Jeff.
Great, so I will post this revised version to the website, and then like I said, I'm gonna try to create a couple different scenarios. This scenario, a worst case if things don't pass, and then a worst case if things don't pass. And then a third one that says, okay, if things don't pass and you pivot and use those less appetizing council managed options, then this is where you'll be.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna present at a very high level, quick level to the council on Friday afternoon. It'll be early afternoon. You can tune in and watch. And I'm thinking it might even be good to at least have Jeff, if you're available Friday afternoon, like probably around 1. Just to be there in case we can't answer a question. But yeah, you're all welcome to watch the city council retreat Friday at 1. But then the big meeting that we really want you here physically for is on May 6th. And what we'll do is we'll take these tables and make a big square, and you and the council, so the council will come out from behind there. And you guys will all be sitting in a big square going over this with the council on May 6th.
Yeah, so this kind of quick summarized view is what we'll try to produce for them over the next couple of days. And then as long as we have our memo written in time for that May 6th discussion, then that's
So like by mid next week if possible.
okay.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of, we did something similar with the school district and the task force. So when we meet with the council here, do you want us sitting like intermixed with them so they can like ask us a question? I was thinking, because that's the way we've done it before, it's been easy for them to ask questions rather than.
Okay, yeah, the clerks usually set it up. Yeah. All right, can I give you guys? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
When I, wrote that
Jeff was
originally,
president.